My name is Margaret Reeves. I'm 43 years old, a retired brigadier general in the United States Air Force. I've worn the uniform longer than I've known how to be anything else. I've flown over war zones that never made the news, held the hands of dying soldiers, and stood in silence after the dust settled. But nothing I faced in uniform prepared me for a message from my own mother. It came 5 minutes before I boarded a flight I had booked for my entire family. Just 7 words. No punctuation, no warmth, no place. Don't come back. I stared at the screen, hoping it was a mistake. But it wasn't. It was the same message they'd always sent, just quieter this time. I typed 2 words in reply, understood, good luck. Then I put the phone in my coat pocket, feeling something small inside me quietly crack. I sat still in the waiting area. People moved around me, laughing, rushing living. Families argued about snacks. A toddler clutched a stuffed bear like his whole world was in it. No one noticed me. No one ever really did. I was just another woman alone with her thoughts, another invisible figure in a place full of motion. I looked down at my boarding pass. First class. Paid by me. The hotel, too. The rental car, every detail. They accepted all of it. But not me. I used to think that time would fix it, that maybe after all these years they would see me, not as a burden, not as the different one, just as part of them. But I was wrong. I had always known I was different. Today they made sure I didn't forget it. I straightened my shoulders, breathed in, then stood. As I walked toward the gate, I caught my reflection in the glass. Not a soldier, just a woman. Tired eyes, straight posture, something fragile hiding beneath the calm. I thought of my mother's voice, sharp and low years ago when she didn't know I was listening. She's not like us. She never was. That sentence never left me, not even after 23 years of service. Not after medals, ranks, and folded flags. It echoed louder than any battlefield. But I still booked the trip, still made the effort, still hoped for what I don't know. A sign. A soft word, a place at the table. Instead, I got silence. Then 7 words on a screen, and that cold, familiar distance that's always followed me home. The gate door opened. I stepped through without looking back. Some battles aren't loud. Some don't come with fire or orders. They begin quietly in the heart, in the choice to keep walking when everything tells you not to. I handed over my boarding pass. The agent smiled politely. She didn't know who I was. She didn't need to. For her, I was just another name, another seat to assign. That was fine. I wasn't looking for recognition. I found my row. Seat 12A. Window always window. I like to look out. I didn't want to see the faces passing me. Not anymore. Not today. I sat down slowly. My hands rested on my lap. The cabin smelled like stale coffee and recycled air. Familiar, like every other flight I'd taken. But this one felt heavier, like I was carrying more than just a bag, like I was carrying every goodbye that never came. The seat felt stiff beneath me, cold, familiar. I leaned back, careful not to let my knee lock. Outside the window, the tarmac shimmered under the morning sun. Planes moved in the distance, slow and deliberate, like they had all the time in the world. Then, without meaning to, my mind drifted back to another morning, another departure. I was 18. It was raining hard, that kind of steady, soaking rain that finds your bones and stays there. I stood in the kitchen, my mother's voice sharp like broken glass. "You're throwing your life away," she said. "That uniform won't make you matter." I remember the smell of burned toast, the chipped edge of the counter beneath my fingers. I held on tight. I didn't cry, didn't yell. I picked up my duffel bag, straightened my back, walked out without a word. No hug, no goodbye. Just the screen door slamming shut behind me. I didn't know it then, but that day leaving saved something inside me. Not because I was brave, but because staying would have broken what little I had left. I sat alone on that bus, uniform pressed, face blank, no one waved, no one followed. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that burns into memory. Some people will think the military makes you cold, hard, but that's not true. Betrayal does that, being unseen, unheard, unwanted, again and again. The hardest part wasn't boot camp, it wasn't deployments or distance, it was learning how to belong in a place that finally treated me like I mattered even when my family never did. I thought distance would dull the ache. Years would make it easier, but pain when it starts early becomes a shape you carry. You just learn how to walk with it. Across the aisle, a family laughed. A young boy kicked his feet holding a toy plane. He had no idea the wars that live in grown-up hearts. No idea how some people never get picked, even at home. I turned slightly, watched them for a moment. The mother fixed her son's collar. The father reached for a snack. Simple love, quiet care, the kind I never knew. I remembered the science fair, my brother Thomas with his crooked volcano project. It barely smoked, but they threw balloons and cake anyway. I watched from the porch. No one noticed I wasn't in the photos. Back then, I told myself it was fine. I was just the serious one, the quiet one, the one who read too much, asked too many questions, and never quite fit the frame. I wasn't forgotten by accident. I was unseen on purpose. Different, they called me. And over time, I started to believe it too. They used to say it jokingly, Margaret's always been different. But it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like a wall, one I could never climb. At dinner, Thomas made them laugh. I sat in silence, measuring every word before speaking. No one asked about my day. No one noticed when I stopped trying to share it. I learned how to disappear, how to take up less space, how to smile politely when praise skipped over me and landed on him again and again. That's probably why the Air Force felt like air, like light, like space I was finally allowed to fill. Not because I wanted to rebel, but because I wanted to matter somewhere. I remember the day I got accepted, placed the letter on the kitchen counter, hoping someone would be proud. My mother folded it, tucked it under a stack of coupons, didn't say a word. 3 weeks later, I left. No goodbye, no hug, just me, a bag, and the quiet sound of the front door closing. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because I had already cried so much for so long that the well inside me had run dry. I thought distance would soften things, that one day maybe they'd reach out, say they missed me or that they understood. But years passed, and the silence only deepened. Each holiday came and went. Cards for Thomas, dinners for him and his kids, for me nothing, just the echo of a house that had never really been home. I stopped waiting eventually, but the ache never left. It just settled into the corners of my life, like dust you stop trying to clean, because it always comes back. People often ask why I joined. Some think it was patriotism, some say it was purpose, but the truth was simpler than that. I was running from silence, from the weight of being unwanted, from a house that never heard my voice and eyes that looked past me like I was barely there. The Air Force didn't ask about my family, didn't wonder who showed up or who didn't. It only asked one question, can you do the job? And I could. I gave everything. Time, energy, sleep, every mission, every test, every rank earned, because failure meant going back. And I couldn't. I knew what waited there. The quiet disapproval, the frozen smiles, the soft, polite ways they reminded me I was never truly theirs. Afghanistan, 2008. The air was thick with heat and dust. We were escorting a convoy through Helmand province. It was supposed to be routine. It never is. An IED hit the lead vehicle. The blast shook the ground. Metal twisted. Fire spread fast. Screams cut through the smoke like broken glass. Captain Russell's unit was inside. His vehicle flipped. He and 2 others were trapped, barely conscious. Fuel leaked. Flames climbed. I didn't think. I dropped to the ground, crawled under the wreckage. Hands burned, uniform torn, pulled them out one by one before the fire took everything. I never told anyone I was afraid. But I was. Every breath felt borrowed. Every second a question, would I make it out? I did. So did they, and then we moved on. Because that's what soldiers do. We survive, then keep walking. His name was Daniel. We met months later, far from that wreckage. A dusty outpost, bad coffee, endless waiting. He wasn't like the others. He laughed easily, carried warmth in his voice, called me Reeves even when he didn't have to. I wasn't looking for anything. My walls were high, my heart locked tight, but he stayed, and slowly, somehow he found a way in. We talked about books, music, what we'd do after the war. He wanted to open a bakery in Vermont, said he didn't know how to bake, smiled anyway. And for the first time in years, I let myself imagine a different life. One with soft mornings and shared coffee, not orders and loss. But that dream ended fast. A roadside bomb, instant, No survivors, I wasn't on that convoy, but part of me died with him that day. The news came at dawn, a knock, a folded letter. I stood in the courtyard boots in dirt sun rising behind a cloud of grief. I couldn't speak. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I nodded, folded the paper, and walked back to my tent like nothing had changed. But everything had. Daniel was gone, and with him the last part of me that still hoped for softness, for home, for anything more than duty. After that, I shut down. No more connections, no more closeness. I buried myself in missions, in ranks, in tasks that didn't ask how I was doing, just whether I finished. I rose quickly, because working hard was easier than feeling, and feelings had already cost me more than I could afford. Grief turned into routine, love into memory, silence into armor. I became the version of myself they never asked about. Strong, efficient, unshakable, medals stacked in drawers, papers stamped with words like commendation and valor, but none of that made it home, at least not in ways that mattered. My family never asked what I'd seen, what I'd lost, what it had cost me to keep standing. They saw the uniform, but not the weight behind it, not the hands I held as breath slipped away, not the names I whispered into dust. Once I flew home with a limp. Left knee shattered during a mission, metal in the joint, nights with no sleep. But when I sat in my mother's living room, crutches by the wall, she didn't ask. She brought me tea eyes on the carpet, talked about a neighbor's barking dog, not the explosion, not the scar, as if I'd just come back from a grocery store. My father sat across the room, newspaper in hand, glasses low on his nose. He looked up once, then went back to reading like I wasn't even there. Thomas never visited. Not a call, not a message. He knew I was home. But I guess that didn't mean anything. At one point, my mother sighed, looked at me like I was a burden, then said flat as ever, "I never understood why you make everything so hard." I almost laughed. I had nearly died, but her focus was still on a stain in the carpet, not the metal in my knee, not the pain I still carried. I left the next morning, no goodbye, no hug, same as always. Only this time, I didn't hope they'd notice, because I knew they wouldn't. And yet, here I was, still trying, still showing up, still booking the flights, the hotel, every detail for a family trip they never planned. I paid for it all, even the first-class seats they sat in now. I thought maybe this time would be different. Maybe comfort would soften them. Maybe time had changed things. But 5 minutes before boarding, their message made it clear. No room, don't come back. 7 words that erased everything I gave. I could have canceled their tickets. Said no. Stood my ground. But I didn't. I walked forward, not for them, but for myself. Some battles aren't about winning. They're about showing you still have the strength to stand. Even when no one claps, even when the people you love leave you behind. The cabin buzzed with a quiet noise. Footsteps, overhead bins clicking shut. I kept to myself. Seat 12A, window always. Then she appeared, a flight attendant. Young, polished, tablet in hand, smile too practiced to be real. "Excuse me, ma'am. Are you Margaret Reeves?" I nodded once. She shifted, glanced down the aisle. "There's a family up front. They've asked if you'd switch seats, so they can sit together." I blinked, didn't answer at first. Which family, I asked, though I already knew. Her eyes drifted to row 8 left side, my mother. Sunglasses on indoors. My father half asleep beside her. Thomas with his perfect kids, none of them looking my way. They had made the request. Not a word to me. Just a quiet effort to move me out of sight. To make me small again. I could have said no. I had every right. It was my seat. Paid for, chosen. Mine. But I didn't argue. Not because I agreed, but because something deeper than anger took hold. A quiet kind of recognition. Familiar. Heavy. This is who they are. Who they've always been. Polite on the surface. Cruel in the quiet. I unbuckled slowly. Stood without a word. The flight attendant gestured back, far back, apologetic, but already moving on. As I stepped into the aisle, I caught Thomas's eyes for half a second. Blank. No guilt, no warmth, just nothing. No one spoke, no one said thank you, no one stood for me, just a slow walk through rows of strangers toward row 30. Eyes followed me as I walked, some curious, some indifferent. No one said a word, just the rustle of clothes and shifting glances. Row 30, Middle seat, no window, no space to stretch, no dignity left. I sat down slowly, my knees stiff, the armrest already sticky with old air. To them, I was just another body. To my family, I was something less. Not an inconvenience, a discomfort they quietly pushed out of view. I kept my face neutral, hands resting on my lap, breath steady, shoulders back. I'd done this before, been invisible while fully present. Some erasures happen loud in shouts and slammed doors, but others like this happen in silence. Deliberate, measured, unmistakable. The farther I moved from them, the colder the cabin felt. Not in temperature, but in presence. In meaning, in memory. I stared ahead. The back of seat 29 faded into a blur. No window beside me. Just the hum of engines and the ache in my knee. It throbbed with the pressure. Years of strain, metal beneath skin, an old injury from a war they never asked about, never wanted to hear. I remembered the last time I visited. Sat in their living room, leg propped up, pain barely managed, crutches resting nearby untouched. No one asked how I got hurt. No one offered more than a glance, just small talk about the neighbor's dog and the stain on the carpet near the fireplace. That silence felt sharper than any battlefield, because I expected nothing from enemies, but I once expected something from the people who shared my name. That visit didn't last long. I left the next morning, early, quiet. No one noticed, no one stopped me. I had just returned from deployment, still healing, still limping, still carrying the weight of names I couldn't forget. But all my mother said was, "You always make things so hard." She said it while wiping the kitchen counter. Didn't look at me when she said it. Didn't mean it to hurt, but it did. It always did. I had nearly died, watched lives end, carried bodies through smoke, and all she saw was inconvenience. All she gave was indifference, dressed as calm. That morning I packed slowly, folded my uniform with care, closed the door behind me soft this time. I didn't slam it. That would have meant I wanted them to hear, and yet, here I was, again, still playing the role, still stepping aside, still shrinking so they could stay comfortable. They had their seats, their peace, their smiles and small talk, and I, sitting in the back, pretended I didn't feel it. Pretended I didn't care. But I did. It still hurt. It always hurt. Even when I told myself it didn't, even when I learned how to carry it quietly, the plane buzzed around me. Voices. Luggage, safety checks, but inside everything was still, like holding your breath underwater, hoping not to sink. I pressed my hands to my thighs, the fabric cool under my fingers, eyes forward, shoulders squared, like I'd done my whole life bracing for impact even when nothing was coming. "Excuse me, are you okay?" The voice came soft. I turned, slowly, carefully. It was the young woman beside me, maybe 20, maybe less. She wore a college sweatshirt, a paperback in her lap, but her eyes weren't on the page. They were on me. I nodded, small, controlled. "I'm fine, thank you." She hesitated, then smiled. Awkward, gentle, a little unsure. "It's just, when you sat down, you looked like something hurt." I gave a shrug, the kind that ends conversations. "Just a seating mix-up," I murmured. She didn't press, but her eyes stayed on me a moment longer, not judging, not pitying, just seeing me. And somehow that made it worse, because strangers weren't supposed to notice what family had ignored for a lifetime. She turned back to her book, but her fingers fidgeted with the pages. Then almost in a whisper she said, "You seem like someone important." I looked down at my hands, calloused, still steady, veins visible, skin worn from years in the field. They didn't look like anything special, just hands that had held too much. "I'm not," I said quietly. "Just life. That's all." She nodded slowly, didn't ask more, but didn't look away. There was something in her expression, not curiosity, not awe, but a quiet kind of respect that I hadn't seen in a long, long time. Not in family, not in friends, not even in command. Just a stranger offering more humanity in 30 seconds than my own blood had in years. We sat in silence after that. Engines humming, lights dimmed. The air felt heavy, but not with noise, with memory, with everything I hadn't said. I watched her from the corner of my eye. Young, nervous, still fidgeting with her book, but her shoulders had softened. She reminded me of someone, not a specific face, but a feeling, That space between strength and uncertainty, the in-between. I thought about who I was at her age, full of questions, no one to ask, full of fire, no one to see it, just pushing forward because I didn't know how to stop. I didn't tell her that. Didn't tell her I saw her. But maybe she felt it anyway. Sometimes silence speaks more clearly than words ever could. Somewhere ahead of me, row 26 aisle seat, an older woman sat with her hands folded. Hair pulled back neat and simple, a paperback mystery resting on her lap unopened. I noticed her glance just once, not staring, not judging, just aware, present, quietly watching. Our eyes met for a second. She didn't look away. Her gaze held something soft. Not pity, not confusion, something closer to concern. She turned back to her book, didn't speak, didn't smile. But I saw her reach for her phone, tap the screen with calm, steady fingers. I didn't know it then, but she was writing a message. To the airline, a complaint about what she had just witnessed in silence. She didn't owe me that. We were strangers. But she saw something wrong and she chose not to ignore it. She didn't say a word to me, didn't make a gesture, didn't ask how I was feeling. But somehow I felt steadier just knowing she saw. Her email would be short. I imagined the words in her tone. Clear, calm, firm. Describing what happened without drama, but with truth. A woman was asked to move, paid for her seat, displaced by her own family, flight crew indifferent, passenger visibly distressed. She placed the phone gently on her tray, folded her hands again, and looked forward like nothing had happened. But something had. Not all justice arrives loudly. Sometimes it begins in small acts, a quiet refusal to look away, a stranger pressing send because no one else would. And that moment, that silent, unspoken gesture meant more to me than any apology my family had never given. I shifted slightly in my seat, brushed my sleeve without thinking, felt the edge of my name patch stitched years ago, worn down but still holding strong. Reeves, a name I carried into war zones, onto airfields, through promotions, through losses, but somehow never fully into my family's heart. Up near the cockpit, the door opened for a brief moment. A pilot stepped out, tall, calm, scanning the rows. Just routine. Or so I thought. His eyes moved quickly until they landed on me. Then they stopped, just for a second too long. I didn't know him, or so I believed. Didn't know that under that clean uniform was a memory 15 years old, still burning clear. He looked at the patch, then at me, then back again, and without a word he disappeared behind the cockpit door. At first, I thought nothing of it. Pilots check cabins all the time, but something in his face, a flicker of memory recognition, something deeper. 15 years ago, Helmand Province, an ambush, fire, screaming, a flipped vehicle, fuel leaking metal bent like paper. I had crawled under wreckage, hands bleeding, knee already broken, pulled out 3 soldiers before the flames reached them. One of them was barely conscious, smoke in his lungs, blood in his eyes, but he lived. I never remembered faces, only hands, voices, the weight of the wounded, but they remembered me sometimes, and somehow, I think he did. Captain Russell. Back then, just a scared lieutenant, now the pilot of this plane, and in that split second, I think the past found its way back. I stayed still, didn't turn, didn't speak, but something in the air shifted, a ripple I couldn't name yet but felt deep in my chest. The engines hummed low, people chatted softly, seatbelts clicked, lights dimmed, but my heart had moved into a different space. I thought of that day again, the dust, the heat, the impossible stillness after the blast, the way survival sometimes felt heavier than loss. Most of what we carry in silence. No headlines, no speeches, just scars under sleeves and names we never say aloud. I looked down at my hands again, still, resting in my lap, fingers slightly curled like they always were, ready but tired. And I waited, not expecting anything, but sensing something was coming. The plane inched forward. Engine steady, lights low, passengers settled in, unaware that something quiet was already unfolding beneath it all. Then the announcement, calm, measured. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Russell. We'll be holding our position for just a moment. People shifted in their seats. A few glanced around confused. I sat up slightly, not nervous, just aware. Then I heard footsteps, slow, intentional. The cockpit door opened again, and there he was, Captain Russell, walking down the aisle. He stopped at my row, met my eyes, voice low, steady, clear. "Ma'am, are you Margaret Reeves?" I nodded. He stood taller, then turned to face the entire cabin. "Everyone, allow me to introduce Brigadier General Margaret Reeves, United States Air Force, retired." For a heartbeat, the entire cabin froze. No clapping, no gasps, just stillness. Thick and full. I didn't move. Couldn't. His words hung in the air, 23 years of service spoken in a single breath. He wasn't done. "She should not have been asked to move from her seat," he said, voice steady, voice full. "I'd like to personally invite her to join us in seat 1A. Murmurs rippled through the rows. People turned. Some blinked. Some looked down. Others simply stared, quiet, wide-eyed, unsure what to do. And somewhere ahead, row 8, my family sat watching. I didn't need to look. I could feel their stillness, that same silence they always used. But now it wasn't mine to carry, not anymore. I placed my hand on the armrest and stood, steady, slow, ready. Captain Russell stepped aside, offered his hand not because I needed help, but because respect has many shapes. And this one mattered. I took it, and together we began to walk, row by row, aisle by aisle. The hush followed us like a shadow. I didn't look at anyone, didn't need to. I could feel their eyes, some ashamed, some stunned, a few soft with understanding. As I passed row 8, I caught them in my peripheral, my mother's face frozen, my father staring at nothing. Thomas sat stiff, hands clenched, mouth slightly open. He didn't speak, but silence has always been his language. I kept walking, not to prove anything, not for revenge, but because I finally understood I didn't belong behind them. I never had. Each step forward felt lighter, not because the pain was gone, but because the weight no longer came from shame. It came from pride earned quietly over years. The cabin remained silent. Passengers leaned back, unsure whether to applaud or stay still. But the air was different now, charged awake. Captain Russell spoke again, his voice calm but firm. "In my 23 years of service," he said, "one thing has always been true. We don't leave our own behind. Not in war, not in life, not in seat 30 surrounded by silence and dismissal." I didn't smile, didn't cry. I just walked past the rows that had always held me back, toward something that finally felt like it saw me. Not a burden, not a mistake, but a name, a story, a life that mattered. When we reached the front, he gestured to seat 1A. First class, wide, quiet, a space I hadn't expected but suddenly felt right. I paused just for a moment, not out of doubt, but to remember how it felt to be seen. Then I sat, leather soft beneath me, air calmer, warmer. But it wasn't the comfort that moved me, it was the shift. The story had changed, not because I forced it, but because someone finally told the truth out loud where the silence used to be. Captain Russell turned back toward the intercom, his last words quiet but clear. "Dignity," he said, "isn't something we give. It's something we recognize." The plane began to move, but something deeper had already shifted. Not just under my feet, but in the ground I'd been walking my whole life. I sat still in 1A, hands resting gently in my lap. The hum of the engine steady now, but my heart beat softer than it had been in years. The cabin was quiet again. A different quiet, not the cold kind. This one held weight, respect, maybe even awe. I wasn't expecting more, wasn't waiting for anything. But then I heard footsteps, slow, careful, approaching from behind the curtain. A man stood in the aisle, mid-50s, gray at the temples, jeans, navy jacket, eyes wide, voice trembling as he spoke. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to bother you," he said. I recognized the name. Then a pause, a breath. "My son." Corporal David Rowe, Afghanistan, 2009. My lungs stopped moving. The name, the year, the place. I remembered. He made it out, because I pulled him out. He stood there, voice shaking. "I never got to say thank you," he whispered. "David's married now, 2 kids, teaches high school chemistry in Ohio." I couldn't speak. My throat closed around every word, but I nodded, slowly, and placed my hand over my heart. He pressed his hand to his chest in return, just once, No speech, no spotlight, just a father saying thank you with everything he had. Then he stepped back, disappearing into the rows. But his presence lingered, like a candle lit in a quiet room, and in that moment I felt something shift inside. This trip, this pain was never about my family anymore. It was about something larger, something they couldn't touch, the lives I'd helped save, the people who still remembered. The plane began to level. Seatbelt sign off, cabin steady, but something wasn't done. I felt it before I saw him. Ethan Thomas stood at the curtain, hands stuffed in his pockets, shoulders tight, eyes unsure like a boy who'd finally realized the damage. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry," he murmured. I didn't agree with any of it. The seat, the way they handled it. I don't know how it got this far. I looked at him. This man I had once called my brother, the golden child, the easy one. Now smaller, less certain, real. Some wounds, I said quietly, don't heal just because someone says sorry. He nodded. Said nothing more. Just stood there holding the weight of what he'd never seen. As Thomas turned to leave, I saw my mother just behind the curtain. Arms crossed, chin raised, but her eyes, different. She didn't speak, didn't move, just looked at me. And for the first time in decades, I saw it. Not warmth, not apology, but recognition. She saw me, not as a problem, not as a stranger, but as a woman. Her shoulders dropped, her gaze softened just a little. A flicker, a shift, not peace, but maybe the beginning of it. I didn't reach for her, didn't nod. Some distances are too wide for one step, but something between us loosened just enough. I turned back to the window, sky stretching wide, cabin calm, and inside, for the first time, I felt still. The flight touched down. Soft bump, slow glide, seatbelts clicked, voices returned, but I didn't rush to leave. I stepped off the plane quietly, into light, into air, and near the gate I saw them, a group of young cadets, barely more than kids. One girl noticed me. Her eyes dropped to my patch, then back up. She nudged the others. They all stood a little taller. Not a salute, not a ceremony, just quiet nods, the kind you give to someone who's been where you hope to go. And for once, I didn't feel forgotten, didn't feel small. I felt seen. If this story found you on a quiet morning or a lonely night, know this. You don't need their approval to know your worth. If you've ever felt like the invisible one, leave a comment that simply says, I understand. Because you are not alone. Not anymore. And if this story stirred something in you, a memory, a feeling, a part of yourself long buried, I'd love to hear it. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story matters too. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, real stories that stay with you long after they end, hit subscribe. We're building something here. Quiet, honest, human, and you belong in it.